Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really, a wild overlap. Internet culture meets government reform. And it's all centered around this one kind of confusing four-letter word, DOGE.
Right. You send over a fascinating stack of sources. We've got stuff on the cryptocurrency, Dogecoin, which most people probably know, and then this surprisingly controversial new government entity, also called DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency.
Exactly. Two completely different worlds using the same acronym. So our mission here in this deep dive is to cut through that noise, figure out what each DOG is really about, explore the controversies, especially around the government one, and maybe most importantly, understand why any of this actually matters to you.
Sounds good. We'll be pulling insights, specific examples directly from those articles and notes you provided.
Let's jump in then.
Absolutely. It's a remarkable coincidence, linguistically speaking. Two entities, vastly different fields, same name. Let's see what the sources say.
Okay, let's start with the one maybe more people have bumped into online, Dogecoin. The sources remind us, yeah, it famously started as a joke way back in 2013.
Inspired by that Shiba Inu dog meme. Or...
That's the one.
Yeah.
And its creation was apparently meant to be a parody, almost.
Yeah, the sources say it was intended to satirize the explosion of other cryptocurrencies popping up then. It's interesting how something starting as a joke could get real traction.
Right. And the sources are pretty clear on this point. It's described as lacking, well, fundamental utility compared to a lot of others. And it's still really reliant on that meme culture.
Which, of course, makes it vulnerable. Highly vulnerable to speculative bubbles.
But technically speaking, it does operate on a blockchain.
It does. It's open source, decentralized.
Yeah.
Your source note it was designed for relatively fast and low-cost transactions, so that gave it some functional appeal, beyond just being a meme.
And you can't really ignore the community around it.
No, definitely not. It's known for being incredibly dedicated, very community-driven.
The sources even mention them banding together sometimes for charity.
That's right, funding charitable causes. A surprising twist for something born as a joke.
Okay, but here's where the sources point out something really interesting, a key difference.
Ah, you mean the supply.
Exactly. Unlike Bitcoin, which has that fixed supply, Dogecoin, it's unlimited.
Unlimited. Adding, over 5 billion new coins every single year?
Every year. Wow. So what's the implication there, according to these sources?
Well, the major concern they raise is inflation and the dilution of value over time. If you're constantly creating more, it fundamentally changes the economics compared to something scarce.
Okay. So even with that strong community, its future, the sources call it uncertain, controversial.
They do, pointing to that speculative nature, maybe a lack of serious development compared to rivals, plus, potential regulatory hurdles that affect all crypto.
And ultimately, its value just kind of hinges on, what? Community buzz. Going viral.
Pretty much. Sentiment-driven, not just fundamentals. It's a fascinating case study from your materials.
Okay, so that's one DOGE. Now the other one, completely different beast.
Yes, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, the government body.
Very real, very new, created under the Trump administration, and its stated mission. What's ambitious?
Extremely. Optimize federal, state, local agencies. Maximize taxpayer dollars. Cut inefficiencies, enhance public service.
Basically transform how government functions.
That's the aim. Your sources talk about promoting accountability, transparency, innovation, and using tech to do it.
And it was initially kicked off by some figures from the private sector.
Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy. The idea was to bring that, private sector approach, speed, efficiency, or their version of it.
Or government reform. Interesting.
And it's noteworthy, one source points this out, despite being totally different things. Both the crypto and the department, they share these threads. Innovation, community, different ways, obviously, and challenging the status quo.
How so? What was the parallel drawn?
Well, one source framed it like this. Dogecoin, maybe? Democratizing finance. While the Department of Government Efficiency aims to democratize governance, make it more directly responsive.
That's a compelling comparison from the sources. Okay, let's pivot. Let's dive deeper into the government DOGE, starting with those early days under Musk's involvement.
Right. So under Musk's initial leadership, the sources describe a very tech-centric approach. And some critics use that tech phrase, didn't they? Moving fast and breaking things.
Yeah, I saw that. And the actions they took, they sound pretty drastic. Mass cuts, huge layoffs.
Oh, yeah. One source cited a number that just jumps out at you. 283,000 people fired.
283,000, that's Staggering.
It is. And beyond layoffs, they even tried to shut down entire agencies.
Really? Like which ones?
The forces specifically mention a big push against the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAI, which was ultimately blocked by a federal judge, called likely unconstitutional.
Wow. Trying to just eliminate an agency, that's definitely disruptive. But the sources really seem to hammer on one major controversy area, DOGE's data access.
Yes, access to absolutely vast amounts of sensitive federal data.
What kind of data are we talking about?
Billions of data points.
Okay.
Citizens, businesses, payments, programs, basically the government's inner workings and its interactions with everyone.
And this access became a huge flashpoint.
A major one. According to your sources, Democratic lawmakers raised serious alarms. They stated pretty clearly that this level of access, plus how the data was apparently handled, it posed a grave threat to national security.
National security, how exactly? What were the specific worries?
The core concern was that if you pull all this data together from different places and analyze it, maybe using AI, you could inadvertently reveal secrets. Secrets about national security, intelligence ops. Two adversaries, Russia or China, were mentioned.
That sounds potentially catastrophic. Did the sources give examples of how it might be mishandled?
They did. Lawmakers apparently cited worries about DOGE staff using unauthorized servers, unknown AI programs for analysis and storage.
Unauthorized servers for sensitive government data.
That was the concern. And one really concrete example highlighted was material from the National Reconnaissance Office. Satellite intelligence stuff, allegedly being easily findable on the DOGE website itself.
Wait, NRO material? Just out there on their website? That sounds incredibly reckless.
That was the claim reported. And experts quoted in your sources definitely backed up these fears.
What did the experts say?
They echoed concerns about vulnerabilities. If data isn't handled perfectly, like being stored on unencrypted flash drives, accessed on personal phones, mixing secure data with less secure systems. One expert was quoted saying a foreign agent wouldn't even have to try that hard to get info.
Yikes.
And the fear wasn't just data leaks, but that AI analysis could reveal patterns, details about covert U.S. activities, potentially getting people killed.
The stakes really couldn't be higher. What was the administration's defense to all this?
Well, as presented in the sources, their argument was basically, we need direct access to find and fix the broken systems. You have to get inside to see the problems. And they also maintained DOGE was shining a light on, waste and fraud.
So the ends justify the means, maybe? Did these controversies lead to lawsuits?
Oh, yes. Lawsuits were filed, and federal judges did step in. They temporarily restricted DOGE's access to some data, including Treasury info, specifically until DOGE staff could get certified in cybersecurity.
Sounds like there was internal pushback, too. Sources mentioned resignations.
They did. More than 20 DOGE staffers reportedly quit. And their warnings, as documented, were pretty stark.
What did they warn about?
Claimed many new hires lacked the right skills for government work, and that they were actively dismantling critical services. One alarming example given was the government trying to rehire workers previously fired from, get this, nuclear weapon programs.
Fired from nuclear weapon programs, and they tried to rehire them. That's unsettling.
It's a detail that definitely makes you pause.
And Musk himself. He made some pretty dramatic claims during all this, too, right?
He did. Publicly claimed his life was under threat because of the cuts. Said opponents basically want to kill me because he was stopping their fraud.
Wow.
And suggested they were targeting Tesla because his work was disrupting waste and corruption.
And this was around the time of protests, attacks on Tesla places?
Exactly. Those incidents were happening, and the Attorney General labeled them domestic terrorism. So a really volatile period.
Okay, so a tumultuous start under Musk, lots of disruption, big controversies, especially around data security and staffing. But the sources indicate the story didn't end there. A leadership change brought a new phase, maybe even more significant.
That's right. After Musk departed, Russell Vought took over DOGE. And tellingly, some voices in your sources describe him as, well, far more dangerous. Even the real threat compared to Musk.
More dangerous than Musk. How so? Is he even more disruptive?
Not in the same way. The sources portray Vought differently. Not a tech disruptor, more like a quiet, precise, strategic insider. He's got 20 years in D.C., knows the system inside and out, knows the levers to pull.
Okay.
His background includes running the Federal Budget Office, OMB, and he co-wrote Project 2025.
Project 2025, that's also described as a manual to reset the government.
Essentially, yes. So Vought isn't about moving fast and breaking things randomly. His approach is characterized in the sources as more like demolition by design.
Demolition by design. What does that mean in practice?
It means aiming for direct, centralized control. One source calls it radical constitutionalism. The idea being the president runs every agency like a CEO with no real checks, like a board. And DOGE under Vought. It operates like a war room focused on strategic memos, legal maneuvers, legal plays, they called it, and using only pre-cleared staff.
And a key strategy you mentioned, expanding something called Schedule F. What's that?
Schedule F is huge. It's a plan to basically overturn 140 years of civil service protection.
140 years? You mean the merit system? Exactly. The Pendleton Act of 1883 set up our current system, hiring based on merit, protection from political firing. Schedule F would let them reclassify tens of thousands of these career civil servants, so they could be fired at will, essentially for political reasons, not performance.
So, loyalty over expertise. Critics compared it to
the spoils system from the 1880s, handing out jobs as political favors.
That's a fundamental change. And the sources say Vought isn't just continuing Musk's cuts. He's making them permanent and going deeper.
Yes, reportedly blocking billions in already approved funding for agencies.
Yeah.
And quietly phasing out entire departments or gutting them.
Which ones did the sources name names?
They mentioned the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, Department of Education. Specific cuts cited include shrinking the CDC by 40%, reducing food safety inspections by a third.
A 40% cut to the CDC. Fewer food inspections. Those sound like they'd have pretty direct impacts on public health and safety.
They certainly could. And there's that quote attributed to Vought. It's pretty jarring.
The one about, we want bureaucrats to feel trauma. When we wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work.
Feel trauma. Wow.
Okay.
That definitely signals intent, doesn't it?
It's blunt, to say the least.
Now, the sources do present the arguments for this approach too, right? What's the justification from proponents?
Proponents, according to your sources, see this as absolutely necessary reform. They frame it as the only way to seriously cut waste, cut redundant staff, and tackle the national debt, which is cited at nearly $37 trillion.
$37 trillion.
Yeah, and the sources note the annual interest payments alone are around $1 trillion.
$1 trillion just in interest.
More than spending on education, transportation, and veterans combined, one source noted. So the fiscal argument is central.
Okay, so it puts that scale into perspective.
Right. Proponents argue this ensures fiscal discipline. It's needed to dismantle the administrative state, which they see as bloated and unaccountable. It's about draining the swamp, fulfilling that promise.
And they claim it's legal.
They maintain these reforms follow legal paths, maybe ones not used in decades, but still legal, and that fixing broken systems is the whole point.
So, necessary, if painful, medicine for a broken system and runaway spending. But the resistance and criticism are strong.
Absolutely. Critics argue this politicizes jobs that shouldn't be political, creates fear. They say it breaks legal lines, despite claims otherwise, guts essential services.
Leading to
potential system collapse in some areas, loss of vital institutional knowledge as experienced people leave or are fired.
And how does that affect real people? Did the sources give examples of the human cost?
They did. One anecdote mentioned was a veteran waiting months longer for a VA claim because staff were gone or reassigned. Another shared the experience of a longtime Department of Education employee. Their whole division basically reassigned overnight. Chaos, uncertainty about programs.
Yeah, anecdotes like that really ground the abstract idea of efficiency in people's actual lives. What about the lawsuits? Are they stopping Vought?
Well, lawsuits are mounting, the sources say. But they also note he seems largely undeterred, described as dancing right on the edge of the law.
Dancing on the edge.
And the courts are apparently struggling to keep pace with all the challenges.
It sounds like even some Republicans might be getting worried.
The sources mention that, yes, some concerned that the cuts are too deep, too fast, and could actually hurt their own constituents who rely on these services.
And this is all happening now. The timeline sounds very compressed.
It really is. Your sources flag specific dates coming up fast. June 15th, a major Supreme Court challenge related to these changes. July, new budget proposals expected from DOGE, potentially with even deeper reforms. And August, Phase 2 of Schedule F set to expand, reportedly targeting intelligence agencies next.
Intelligence agencies. Wow. So the message is clear. This is far from over.
Exactly. The sources suggest DOGE is just getting started on this path.
Okay, so let's try to connect the dots here. We've looked at Dogecoin. We've looked at the Department of Government Efficiency. What does this deep dive into these two very different DOGEs ultimately mean for you listening right now?
Well, I think whether you're looking at the crypto world, volatile, community-driven, meme-inspired, or this really ambitious, highly controversial restructuring of the federal government, the term DOGE in both cases points to these powerful movements driven by calls for innovation, community clout, and fundamental change to how things are done.
Right, challenging the established systems.
Exactly.
And specifically thinking about the government's DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. The actions being taken now, especially under Vought, they have real, tangible potential impacts on your life, right?
Absolutely. Think about it directly. This could affect government jobs, maybe your own or someone you know. It could affect the quality, even the availability of public services you rely on, your family relies on. And it fundamentally changes how your tax dollars are being spent or not spent.
It really puts some huge debates front and center, doesn't it? Debates happening right now. The sources highlight them. That trade-off between stability and really rapid disruptive change.
Yeah. And how much power should one branch, the executive, really have? How much direct control?
And is short-term chaos, is that an acceptable price for promised long-term reform? Big questions.
Huge questions. It's a very dynamic situation unfolding.
What's so fascinating, wrapping up, is just how these two completely distinct uses of DOGE both somehow represent these unconventional forces trying to shake things up, finance on one side, governance on the other.
This is a striking parallel.
And our deep dive into the Department of Government Efficiency.
Wow.
It certainly raises a ton of urgent questions about efficiency versus security, efficiency versus basic public services, the future of the civil service itself, all in a world that's changing incredibly fast.
It does leave you with a final thought, perhaps. Considering the scale of government spending, that debt number you mentioned, and the arguments being made for such drastic reform, it prompts the question, what has the current system, maybe this perceived dependency on government, actually gotten us? Are you better off? Or just managed more?
Better off or just managed?
Yeah.
That's definitely something to think about as these major shifts continue.